Melissa McDowell, and welcome to Teenage. Today we're going to be talking about issues that affect us all. And with us now is a special guest who took time just to come and visit us, have a little interview with us, and that's Illinois Senator Paul Simon. Hi, welcome.
Happy to be with you here.
Thank you. Thank you for taking your important time to come out and visit us. First, before we start talking about now, let's go back to young Paul, when he was a little boy. When you were younger, what did you want to be?
At one point, I wanted to be, we had a journalist who was very famous. You would not remember by the name of Walter Lippmann, who was a commentator and was well known. I wanted to be the Walter Lippmann of my generation. And I got interested and started off in the newspaper business. But I ended up in a community that had a very corrupt situation, and I started writing about it, and one thing led to another, and the next thing I knew, I was in politics.
Oh my God. So, what college did you go to? Did you take journalism?
Yes, I was a journalism major. I went to the University of Oregon first. I lived in the state of Oregon. My father was a Lutheran minister out there. And then I went to Dana College in Nebraska, a small liberal arts college in Nebraska.
So when exactly did you discover your interests in politics?
Well, I think I grew up with an interest in politics. And my father was always interested, though, you know, he was not active politically. I can remember when I guess I must have been about 8 or 9 years old. My father took me to hear Eleanor Roosevelt speak. So he was interested. So it's been a kind of a lifelong interest, but I thought I was going to be commenting about what politicians were doing rather than being a politician myself.
You felt like a sense of justice to go and do this because of the town you came from was a little corrupt?
Well, it was the county where, frankly, underworld figures controlled both political parties through financing. And I tried to get someone to run for sheriff or state's attorney to show that you didn't have to have the benediction of this group to get elected, and I couldn't get anyone to run. I wasn't interested in running for sheriff, and I'm not an attorney. So I ran for state representative. I was 25 years old, not that much older than all of you. I wasn't supposed to win, and unexpectedly I won, and I've been in politics ever since.
So you just took the risk?
I took a risk, and this is true for life, and I don't care what field you're in. You have to take some risks to get ahead. If you want to do everything safely, you're not going to get ahead.
When you were our age, did you ever figure on yourself being a senator, you know? Or
no,
did you?
I can't say that I never did. I suppose we all imagine, you know, I think I probably imagined myself a pro football player maybe too, I don't know. But I did not anticipate that's what I would be doing.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit, you know, what's the differences like between Republican and Democratic? Because there's, you know, when I hear them on TV, you know, you hear so much about on the news, you know, he's Republican, he's Democratic, and then, you know,
Republicans do this and that, and Democrats do this and that. Is there like a set guideline?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we do not have the differences between parties that you have, for example, in Western Europe. There the differences are much greater. We tend to pull more toward the center here. But, in fairness, you're hearing one side, but I'll try and be reasonably fair about this, and that is the Democratic Party tends to be the party that says we can make progress in our country by helping people who are middle income and lower income people. You help them, and then the whole economy prospers. My friends in the Republican Party tend to believe you help the management of General Motors, you help people who are in the upper income level, they will invest, and then they're going to help everybody. It's a kind of a trickle up or trickle down theory. And the reality is you can go too far in either direction. And so you need a balance. And we have, I think, up until recently, maintained a reasonably good balance. I think we have now some problems in our society, though.
When you started off in politics, how did you decide what party you wanted to be in? Did you know from the start that you wanted to be a Democrat? Or?
No, I really didn't, because as I mentioned before, I grew up in the state of Oregon. And out in the state of Oregon, Republicans were pretty progressive. My father actually had been had grown up in Wisconsin, where there was a leader by the name of La Follette, who was a progressive. He was neither Democrat nor Republican. And so I kind of grew up thinking of myself as a progressive or liberal Republican. But then, I guess like most of us, we follow our parents, and when my father moved to Illinois and my parents moved here, they became Democrats. I became a Democrat.
What makes you want to drive ahead and strive forward into higher offices from when you first started out that office? Why didn't you just were comfortable with staying there year after year? Why did you want to go forward and become from this to that?
Yeah, I guess the question is, and this is a question all of you have to face, the question is, what do you want out of life? And I think one of the great lessons you have to learn is that you get satisfaction in life not from what you take, but from what you give. That helping others is what really makes a difference. I have a friend who says life is like a bucket of water. Put your hand in, take it out. Doesn't make any difference whether you lived or you didn't live. It couldn't be more wrong. And if you're serving as state representative and you're able to get some things done, things that aren't that noticeable, but for example, the GED test that you've probably heard about. It was my bill that set those up statewide in the state of Illinois a long time ago. But you see all these things, and then you get a chance to move up and contribute in a larger area. And so today, I have a chance. Well, last week, as we're taping this, the President signed my literacy bill, which will, for the first time in a comprehensive way, attack adult illiteracy. I'm working on a variety of things. I'm leaving a week from Monday, as we're talking here, for Africa, to visit some areas in Africa where they're having some major problems, and to see how we can respond more effectively.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. When we come back, we'll finish talking about this. We have to take a little break, but when we come back, we'll be talking with Paul Simon some more. And welcome back to Teenage. If you're just joining us, we're with Illinois State Senator Paul Simon, so welcome. You were leaving off. You're leaving for Africa?
I'm going to Africa a week from Monday.
For what reason?
Several different things. I serve on the Foreign Relations Committee. I chair the subcommittee on Africa. Liberia is a country that's had a lot of problems. Going there to take a look at those problems. Ethiopia has problems. Fortunately, the news is getting better from Ethiopia. We're looking at that. Kenya has some problems. South Africa, I think they're probably the best known problems. But South Africa is moving in a constructive direction. But I'm going to be meeting with the leaders there to see what role the United States can play to improve the situation. And then go to Namibia. It's a newly independent country.
Now moving on a little, you hold education is very important to you.
I spend more time in education than any other issue, yes.
Okay, going back to, on educating, and, you said the U.S., in a statement you just made, the U.S. plays a big role, like in Liberia and stuff, helping out with some of the situations there. How do you feel, what's your opinion on what's happening now with Russia and the U.S.'s, not interference, but, what's your opinion on everything that's going on down there?
Well, it is good news. And what has happened is fairly dramatic, not simply in terms of political power in the world. But remember, before the Berlin Wall came down, we had two nations confronting each other, each of whom had enough nuclear power to totally destroy civilization within a matter of hours. We have moved back from that. That is a huge change, and a change for the better. It doesn't mean we don't have problems. Obviously, there are problems.
Plenty.
But the world has improved dramatically just in the last 2 years.
Aside from Russia, what interest does the U.S. have in lending support and money to, let's say, Israel or Africa? What will that do for us? Why are we why are we going there? Just to...
Well, the answer is we're in an interdependent world. You have people in DuPage County who say, why should we pay attention to Chicago? The reality is Chicago and DuPage County have a great deal to do with each other.
But wouldn't a lot of people argue that and say, you know, we can't even help our own people, let alone help someone else in a different part of the world that we don't even know?
Well, the answer is we ought to be doing much better for our own people.
Yeah.
And we have put the fastest growing item in the federal budget is interest, believe it or not, for which we get absolutely nothing. In fact, it's costly to us, and that's because both political parties are not facing up to our fiscal problems. But in terms of what we spend, excluding the military, we spend, it's less than 1% of the budget. So it's a very small amount in the budget. It is much less than the Western European countries spend, less than Japan spends. And at one point, we were spending 2.9% under the Marshall Plan after World War II. We spent 2.9% of our nation's income on helping the poor beyond our borders. We now spend less than 1/5 of 1%.
So you think we should be spending more?
Well, I think we have to continue, but what I haven't included there is what we're spending on the military side.
Yeah.
And I think we ought to be cutting back on the numbers of bases abroad. You know, the world has changed, as we just talked about the last 2 years. We don't need 1 million Americans stationed abroad as we have right now. I think we ought to be cutting back. Great Britain has announced a 6% cut in her military budget. I think we can safely now cut back some and spend more money on education and on other things. 1949, 9% of the federal budget went for education. Today it's 3%. The amount of aid to students. We had a GI Bill after World War II. If you were just to add the inflation factor, that would amount to a little better than $8,000 per student per year to go to college.
But shouldn't it even be a little higher than 9%, even when it was at its highest? Because you would think that the government, with the children, the people they're educating, you would think they spend a little more money than the budget.
Because they're the future.
Because we are the future.
The answer is I'd like to get, but right now I'm fighting to get it above 3%.
Yes.
You know,
that's your
I got to live in the real world. And
What is the people who oppose you? What are their arguments? That they don't want to fund education? How do they say that?
The argument is not that they don't want to fund education, but we have an argument over where you put the money. You know, do we continue with Star Wars? Do we continue with B-2 bombers? And so, when I had an amendment to reduce the defense budget by 2%, I got defeated. Then when I put an amendment in to reduce it by 1%, I was defeated. And so it is. We had the battle, and here would probably be. I'd get different votes right here on this issue. But one of the questions is a space station. Now, the scientific community believes that we can learn as much from unmanned shuttles as we can from the space station. It costs about $38 billion. Is this something we should do or shouldn't we do? But if you spend money on the space station,
Then
you don't have the money for education.
So right now you're just trying to prove that education should deserve more than...
Education is clear. A fellow named David Halberstrom has written a book called The Next Century. And in that, he was stationed with the New York Times in Japan for a while. He says, the stem that winds the watch of the Japanese economy is education. Yeah. And I really believe that. And we have to do more for college students. We have to do more for the central city in Chicago. You know, out here in the suburbs where we are right now, frankly, most of you get a pretty good education. That's not universally true. And you get hurt, ultimately, when others don't get a good education.
Even around my community, schools are closing down. They don't have enough money to pay their teachers. And it's just, it looks like a real bad situation, you know.
How could, I don't know if this has anything to do with what you do, but I remember when the White Sox wanted to go to Florida, the state, or I don't remember if it's the state or the city, was ready to pay them all sorts of money and take away money from education just to get them to stay, a baseball team, just to get them to stay in...
well, I'm not involved in state government, but I think that the decision there probably was a right decision, and particularly since the state gets a return on a percentage, and the White Sox have been getting good attendance lately. It has paid off. But what the state has to look at on something like that is the number of jobs that are involved. And it's a baseball team is more than just a baseball team.
Oh, I see
It's a
what
lot
you're
of other
Is that
things,
what-
but I'm not an expert on that
Yeah.
particular
I see.
Is
thing.
that why they don't want to cut back on all the military bases? Because all those, what are all those people going to do when they lose their jobs?
Well, except that if something is a needless expenditure, then I think we have to go back and say, is this in other words, instead of having so many bases in Germany or so many bases in Japan, should we be taking some of that same money and putting it in education in this country? My feeling is that we should.
Well, bringing up the topic of education, you mean you're educating the teens and the young adults of America, but if we're getting educated, how do our opinions, stand against
As
all the
teenagers.
adults? How do our opinions as teenagers, get heard in the political world? Or
Well,
don't they really mean
for
anything?
example, I hold town meetings. Just had my 475th town meeting as a United States Senator yesterday. We have teenagers. I had a 9-year-old girl ask me a question yesterday at a town meeting. I'm eager to listen to teenagers. But let me ask you this question, because this is a question that we face in politics. How do we get more teenagers, people of your age, interested in the political process?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Good point.
How do I do it?
I just
I
think
think it's important in the schools. I mean, how many schools teach current affairs? I mean, I remember when I was in grammar school, I had a teacher that made us read the newspaper and take a test on it. I mean, people didn't even know what's going on in the world, so why would they really care? I mean, people take surveys. How do you feel about Supreme Court Justice nominee so-and-so, and they don't even know who it is.
A lot of people-
So how can you get concerned when you don't know?
a lot of people our
anything
age are
about
very
it.
intimidated by politics, and they think, well, their opinion will have nothing to do with anything, so, why should I even vote?
Well, what do we do in a construction? I got one answer here. The schools have to do more.
Exactly.
And yeah, because also I want to agree with Diana because when you're younger, I think they should start teaching you about your role being an adult, future adult, what you could do for the politics, because there's a lot, like we were talking earlier, there's a lot of 18-year-olds who can vote, but they don't, and a lot of 18-year-olds aren't aware that, their vote can make a change in what they want done for, our world.
Absolutely. Percentage of 18-year-olds who vote is very low, I regret to say.
But I mean, nowadays, you talk with your friends and half of them
no
don't
big
know
deal.
anything about politics. You'll see an issue on TV and you won't know anything about it.
How do we change that?
Well, I also think a lot of times that I'm not saying you particularly, but a lot of people want to make politics something that's lofty and elite, so people don't get to know. I mean, there are some people that would rather say, well, this is too much for you to know, so just let me take care of it. And I think there needs to be more senators that really want to explain things and put things in plain English, and
Yes, so
instead of trying to make it
exotic
something
words that we don't
lofty
understand.
and elite.
Yeah, I mean, I know
I
nothing about what's going on. I mean, I know like the general things, but I mean, I'm not voting for another 2 years, and so it's like in my mind, unless someone's going to sit down and say, okay, Shannon, this is what it's about, I don't have time to go out of my way and, read up on our past history of our
The
government.
difficulty, Sharon, is 2 years from now when you are eligible to vote, you're not going to all of a sudden, there's going to
That's
be
right.
a
Jump up
magic
That's
thing.
right, and that's why I think my schools should have,
That's why we should start
That's
now.
why,
Yeah,
like in my schools,
absolutely.
they should tell me what it's about. Because
Yeah.
when my time comes, 18, I'm going to be like voting. I'm going to know like the president that I saw, someone who's running for president on the TV screen. I'm not going to know
I
everybody
think
who's
there's
running for
just
everything.
too many problems, and simply a kid who goes to school for, 8 hours a day, is not going to pick up this information. There has to be a huge overhaul of a lot of different things, family life,
Well,
sometimes
morals,
children-
everything, not just education.
Children spend most of their time in school. You go to school every single
Spend
day
most of their
except for
time
the
in front of the
weekends.
TV.
Well, okay,
Well,
in
this
front of
year
TV.
Excuse me. Well, this year for me, I'm like taking government classes and stuff to learn up on this stuff. Well, that's good, but some kids, I mean, it's offered to us now, but sometimes we just don't take that
Yeah.
offer.
But somehow, we have
We
to
should
improve
increase
the
it, yeah.
process. And we have 7 good brainstormers here, and I hope you will help to stimulate others and get more people involved.
Do you think the problem is voting itself with the just onslaught of names? It's like
Yeah.
you only know names that you're familiar with.
But people who come to your door and give
Yeah.
you something that you remember when you go to vote.
But if you wait and just until the election, then it's too late, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
And
Start getting really
what you really have to do is start taking an interest in the issues in education or health care or the deficit or environment or, you know, whatever interests you, and then find out where people stand, and then get into your political party, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, and get into your party and try and see that good people are nominated. I would add one other thing, is to volunteer. Volunteer for a candidate or a political party, and pretty soon they're going to have you stuffing envelopes, and when they see that you're willing to volunteer, pretty soon one of these days they'll say, would you be willing to be a candidate for state representative or whatever it is, and you know, and then all of a sudden you'll be moving up in the process more and more.
Where does voting get you? I mean, I know it gets you somewhere, but like, no, I don't mean to be like, duh, but when I've heard like things like, everybody votes, but only like out of everybody who votes, what we say only goes a little bit into who gets the position. You know, it's like, isn't there, because I went to Constitution in 7th grade, and I remember very little bit of what I was taught. Honestly, I remember very little bit of what I was taught. And all I can remember is, when you vote, it doesn't go, it's what the person, the people's vote isn't what goes directly to putting whoever you voted for into president. It goes through another group of people who then decide who, well, okay, well, this is what the people think.
Well, we have an electoral system for president.
Yeah.
And if we can set, but with the exception of one time when the majority of people went one way and the Electoral College went another way. And that was long before any of us were alive. And Rutherford Hayes was elected president. But generally speaking, and this is true for governor, for senator, whoever gets the most votes wins. And what you ought to make sure, and frequently, Lyndon Johnson, who became president of the United States, was elected senator in Texas by 87 votes. When John F. Kennedy won for president, he won for president because he carried Illinois. He carried Illinois by about 10,000 votes, or about 1 vote a precinct. That's, you know, that means your vote is really important.
Well, this might be strange to ask, but how do you touch base with the voters to see what their needs are?
Well, that's why I have town meetings. That's why I have discussions like this, so that when I'm asked to participate, I try to do it. I think it is extremely important that you're not just back in Washington listening to the high-paid lobbyists, that you're out really listening to what people have to say. I just came, I think I mentioned before we started taping this, I just came from a meeting with the officers of ServiceMaster. I was very impressed, frankly, by the officers of that corporation. I've been able to help them a little bit on one special problem they have, but here I see an American corporation that really is doing some exciting things. They get acquainted with me, I get acquainted with them. I'm able to respond a little more now.
So you're able to help them, and then they're able to help you when
that's
time to vote.
Yeah.
Is your opinion sometimes altered? You know, say if you think one thing about a topic and all these people think differently, is your opinion sometimes altered by what they think?
You change your opinion, and I can't possibly know as much as, you know, I can't possibly know as much about your schools, for example, as you know about it. And so that is one factor. And then another factor is people write to you and they say, this is the situation. And I may have my staff check into it or whatever. I remember when I was a state legislator, I received a letter from a prisoner, and the Menard State Prison says, those of us who are paroled, who have a job and relatives waiting, we're given parole supervision. While people who don't have relatives, don't have a job waiting, you serve your full time, you're given $25 and a suit of clothes, and you're just pushed out in the cold. He said the people who really need help are those who are not getting it. I checked into it, found out he was right. I introduced a bill that said, at that point, the law has changed some since, but said 90 days, you get put out, 90 days you get supervision, you get help to find a job and so forth. And we reduced the number of prisoners who were going back into prison. I mention that because it was a prisoner who wrote to me. Prisoner can't even vote.
I was just wondering, going off of what he was saying, do you ever feel like sometimes you have to compromise what you feel on a certain issue because you know it conflicts with the good of the state, like the Clean Air Act? How that would probably benefit, you know, the whole nation, but not necessarily benefit the state of Illinois because of the coal miners or things like that. Do you have conflicts, inner conflicts, dealing with what's good for the state and what's good for America?
You do have. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions, and the Clean Air Act is an example. I used to be in the House representing the biggest coal-producing state and district in the state, but I've always said we needed a Clean Air Act. But then when the Clean Air Act finally came along, it penalized the Midwest excessively. We will, if there are not modifications, in the Midwest, we're going to experience about a 24% increase in our utility bills, while other regions of the nation will not experience any increase. I didn't think that was fair, and yet I favor a Clean Air Act.
Mm-hmm.
So here I have a conflict, and I ended up voting against it, and I hope we can work things out, even though when I was in the state legislature, I led the fight for having the original clean air laws here in the state of Illinois.
Getting back to corporations, are American companies still losing ground to like a lot of Japanese companies coming over and investing?
Buying us out.
Because I know we can't invest there. They don't allow American companies over there.
Well, we have problems. One of the problems we face in connection with trade is that we have this huge deficit, and we are dependent on other countries to buy our bonds. Japan, for example, buys about $13 billion worth of our bonds every month to finance the government of the United States. Pretty tough to get tough with your banker. That's where we are. But part of it is related to our own deficit, for our failure to pay attention to our fiscal problems, because that keeps interest rates high. I had two officers of Chrysler came to me who knew I was working on this and said, we borrowed $1 billion, we're paying 12 3/8% interest.
Sir, I don't mean to cut you off.
But you're going to.
But yeah,
All right.
But we're out of time. Thanks a lot for coming to see us. And I hope you enjoyed this show. See you next time on Teenage.
Sorry.
Capturing the spirit of suburban Chicagoland, you're watching the award-winning CTV3, Continental Cablevision Channel 3.